there's a lot of questions related to this project, clearly. What would you say are the main hurdles? I'm quite aware there are quite a few, but what would you mention as the main hurdles?
I think the main hurdles, so that's why I spent a bit of time talking about stakeholder alignment and collaboration, because the individual parts of the full chain have been demonstrated before. So it's really about this putting it together, and putting it together means not only the technical interfaces between capture and shipping and storage. It means the agreements that you need to have in place and the commercial framework, not least. So I think the biggest hurdle is to keep all those stakeholders aligned and loyal to the objective of the project and loyal to the schedule. As there are different projects working towards one investment decision, it's very important that we all keep to one target date and we arrive at the same time. So I think that is the main hurdle, and of course in the end of the day it's going to be to what kind of commercial agreement will you get with the state? Will it be able to pass our internal decision gates?
But are you saying that technically you are on the right track? You know exactly what techniques you're going to use for the capture, for instance?
Well, I should be careful to talk about capture because we are not on the capture side, we are on the shipping and storage.
I know.
But capture has been done other places, so I would be surprised if there are challenges that you cannot tackle on the capture side. On the shipping and storage, we know we can do it, yes. So I don't think the technical hurdles are the ones that are the biggest ones.
But it's been mentioned earlier today that it's a quite expensive project as it is of today, and you've said we're looking into driving expenses down.
No, so
what makes it expensive?
So again, you talked about earlier that the capture side, capture technology is expensive. I don't know enough about capture to answer that part. On our part, yes, it's expensive, but part of developing that best practice is to find ways to simplify and is to take the cost down. And of course, the cost per ton CO2 injected from this first phase will be high. But we are developing an infrastructure that will have relatively low incremental costs for additional volumes, and that's a way of driving the unit cost down. So by building a concept that has the potential to take more volumes for a low additional cost will help in driving the cost per ton down. And in the end of the day, it's the unit cost that needs to come down. So.
During my interview with Jim Herbertson, we spoke a bit about which sectors could benefit from this technology. He said cement and steel, and you pointed to some industries in Denmark that could benefit from that. Can you develop a bit on who could benefit from it?
Well, I think Jim Herbertson answered it very well this morning. He talked about how in the past the focus was probably more on power production, on coal-fired power plants. Now it's shifting a bit, and that's a very nice thing about this project is that the sources for the CO2 here are from cement factories where there is an inherent need for capturing the CO2. The CO2 comes from the production of the cement itself, not from the combustion of the energy use. So you will need it. Same with the waste to energy. So I think those and steel. So I think the question was well answered this morning. You also talked about net negative CO2 emissions. So interesting discussions we are having with Sweden is that in Sweden they are using biomass for power production and looking to use CCS to get a net negative CO2 release. So all those segments are of course of interest to us.
I have a few more questions for you, but I was thinking maybe we should see if there are any questions from the floor. We can take them sort of while we go along. Yeah, go ahead.
Sten Brødbæk, Timco Maritime. A couple of years ago, there was a project in Denmark where Maersk Total was looking at carbon capture as well as a methodology in order to increase the oil production. Is that part of the program as well in this scheme? That was question one. Question 2, one of the biggest challenges in the past was that the price or the cost for carbon is zero, or I think that must be the main driver to get, I think you were also pointing at it earlier today, in order to drive that change, we need to have the right price and capture. Do you agree in that?
Yeah, so I will answer that as part of this project. You asked if this project has anything to do with EOR, so we are not in EOR. This is carbon capture and storage. It's not carbon capture and utilization and storage. So this is a pure carbon capture storage project, first of all. The second one is how to make this a good business. So we talk about commercial models here. The commercial models that we are trying to create here would be to accommodate third-party customers. Yes, I think it's obvious that there will need to be an alternative price of releasing CO2 higher than what it is today. I mean, today it's too cheap to release carbon. So that's another perspective. In this project, we are trying to show that the technology and the full chain CCS works. And at least that will show the policymakers that if you were to introduce a CO2 price, we have an alternative. You can do this.
So are you saying that the business model is also dependent on government regulation, maybe in relation to different sectors or companies?
The long-term business model will need to have we need to have an income from those who wants to store
tougher
CO2.
regulation.
The first phase, the demonstration project that we are working within in Norway, will be based on state subsidies.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking maybe tougher regulation on, for instance, steel and cement factories when it comes to CO2 emissions.
Yeah, so this is clearly out of the project remit, but we can see that that's part of what needs to be developed. There is a project development that we work with. We obviously have, we talk to the world around us, and market development is another part, and that's what we're talking about now, is really the market development for CCS as a market.
Okay. Did we finish the question? Both questions? Good.
Also.
Any further question from the floor? Yeah, go ahead. You in the middle. Yeah. Oh, just raise your hand.
Yeah, my name is Peter Snedler. I'm from Welltech. I'm just wondering about this.
We just need the microphone for the video recording.
My name is Peter Snedler. I'm from Welltech. I have a question regarding storage technology. How sure are you of the sealing technology in order to ensure that the CO2 stays in the reservoir when you have injected it? Are there any technical challenges in that kind of injector well?
So you talk about the well itself, are you?
Yeah,
not
the well
the
and
leak
the
path.
reservoir.
Yeah, so well, first of all, the geological evaluation will have to assess the risk of any leakage through geological faults, the complex itself, and that's part of what we do normally in an oil and gas company. We map the geology. When it comes to the well technology, so one thing is the injector well. So I believe we have fairly good control of the seal in the well that we are drilling, and that has been proven on other projects like the Snøhvit project. Quest in Canada have done this for some years already, injected CO2 for storage. There is an alternative to the saline aquifer that I mentioned, which is to inject in depleted oil and gas fields. And there you have a potential leak path in existing wells. And for those kind of reservoir evaluations, you will need to include then an evaluation of the wells that have been drilled and left in that field from before, because they are obvious leak paths or potential leak paths. So I don't think it's a general answer. I think you have to look at each individual field and the technology that was used when those wells were drilled and abandoned.
So this morning, Martin Frode Nebell said that maybe some wells in the North Sea could be used as storage. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, I think some fields may be used for sure. Yeah, that's a potential in that. I think the larger potential is probably from the mapping of CO2 storage is probably in saline aquifers, but depleted fields may play a role as well. There are other challenges with the depleted fields that we have discovered and we studied related to flow assurance and technical complexity. But that's part of the learning that we have done during the conceptual phase or the project definition phase, that we will capture in lessons learned and will be available for anyone who will develop the next project.
You said there are quite a few stakeholders, including public opinion and NGOs. Do you have, or have you had a discussion, a public discussion in Norway about questions related to this issue, security, leakages, etc.?
I think compared to the discussion that probably have been held on the continent, we are in a way fortunate in that our storage is very far out in the sea. That takes away a lot of concern from potential leak and so on. The site where we will have the intermediate storage is also quite remote, but we have done normal risk analysis and proven that there is no safety risk for those who work or stay around that site. So I don't think, and whether we have had a public discussion, the topic is very, very open in the public in Norway, and perhaps more around the funding of it and the certainty of the state's ambition going forward on making an investment decision.
You've also mentioned to me that you're very often met with the question, is it really necessary? Well, so what do you answer?
Well, I think this presentation this morning was exactly the answer that we will give on that. The scenarios that the scenario builders and perhaps the two most credible ones, IEA and IPCC, are very clear that CCS has to be part of the solution, and that is what keeps us very motivated to go into work every day. That we are trying here to bring something forward that we see will be necessary for the climate in the future.
Okay, I think maybe there was a final question from the floor. No? Yeah, go ahead.
Martin Nesby, Olgas, Denmark. You talked about the role of the state. You said that you need state subsidies. You said that a couple of times. And Jim Herbertson earlier today talked about CCS as a building block towards capturing CO2 from the atmosphere. So for many reasons, it's an important issue. Is that realized by the state? And what is the role of the state? Maybe you could expand a little bit on how that is seen. Is that seen as a barrier? Or are they helping, and is funding available? So maybe you can clarify a little bit about how you see the role of the state also going forward, and something for us to learn maybe?
Yeah, so maybe just to explain again the context of the project that we are working in. This project has been launched by the Norwegian state. It's been tendered by the Norwegian state to create the full value chain CCS project and to demonstrate the technology and how a commercial model would look like. So the state has done this to contribute to this technology and this concept being brought one step further on. I think when you talk about the long term, the state will not want to be in it and subsidize it forever. This is about establishing or initiating an industry that eventually will have to live on its own. But when I talk about state subsidies, we are talking about the demonstration phase, this first project, including the 2 capture plants from outside of Oslo and the storage site that we are responsible for. So that's the part I'm talking about for state subsidies.
So basically you have a full technical solution, but you're quite far from having a commercially viable solution.
I think we are where we should be. We are in the project definition phase, and the commercial negotiations, they were planned to be going in parallel with technical studies. So I wouldn't say we are far away. If you talk about the long-term business model, we are far away in that we don't have an alternative price for releasing carbon. But that's where the collaboration comes in. And that's for more than only this project to solve, of course. But we want to show that it can be done. Yeah.
Let's have a final question.
Just a question, Martin Edwards from Hess. Just a question about the efficiency of all this. I mean, to get your CO2 stored requires a great deal of energy, or some energy anyway. So in the capture and the liquefaction, pumping, all of that. Have you looked at the efficiency of that process? Presumably in Norway you're helped by the fact that much of that energy may come from hydro. But is there a kind of, is there a rule of thumb as to what the energy efficiency of the whole process in terms of CO2 stored versus CO2 that might be liberated through actually storing it?
So I think what you're tending towards is a life cycle analysis of this, and there is a life cycle analysis being done for this. We don't have it yet. It's Gassnova, which is the project integrator on behalf of the Norwegian state, is carrying out a life cycle analysis of the full value chain. But of course, that also is something that will necessarily be improved with more projects coming along. I don't think you should expect the first project to be the final answer on that efficiency. That's part of our job, is to bring that efficiency or start the downward trend on consumption per CO2 injected. Yeah. But as I showed with our onshore plant, it's not a very energy intensive process. We are basically getting CO2 into some tanks and we are pumping it offshore. It's not very energy intensive, that side of it.
Okay. Frode Nebell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.